Cassandra's story speaks to me like no other. I gravitated to it even before I knew all of the reasons why. Her story makes me feel seen. Her growth gives me hope. Her journey helps me find my way. It all puts into song what I have sought all along. The answer to my freedom.
Lousy little pest.
Please, Raps, trust me! Ah!
Cassandra.
Cass, no. Wait.
Wait?
Cassandra.
Cass, trust me. Becoming the villain isn't the
Is that what you think I am?
Cassandra.
Cassandra! You want me to be the bad guy? Fine. Now, I'm the bad guy. I've done terrible things! I tried so hard to prove that I was more than everyone thought, but they were right.
Hello. Just wanted to give a heads up. While the show Rapunzel's Tangled Adventure is intended for young adults and is palatable by even younger audiences, given how much it has spoken to my adult life, this essay is not necessarily appropriate for children. Also, a bit of a trigger warning, I do touch on these topics, so if any of those are particularly sensitive to you, you may want to pass on this essay. Otherwise, I hope this essay does you some good, as it has for me.
Oh, here, let me show you, sweetheart. Turn the key like this, so whenever you hear this tune, you'll think of your dear, sweet mother and the love I have for you.
There you are, Cassandra.
Who are you?
A friend. Or at least I'd like to be. Come. Do you recognize that child? Light, please.
Not now, darling. Mummy's in a hurry.
That's my...
Mother, yes, it is.
Are you going to see the castle? Can I come?
Absolutely not, Cassandra. You know your place is here. Oh, stop with the pouting. It's very unbecoming. Now, Mother needs to rush off for just a teensy tiny moment, but I won't be gone long, and this cottage isn't going to clean itself, you know.
Mama?
Must I do everything?
Thank you, Mama.
Yes, dear.
One of the dynamics between Cassandra and her mother was that unpleasant emotions were shut down. Unlike Cassandra, I would get needed attention when I was sad, but my problem was that anger wasn't allowed. However, it wasn't enough to have just one. To have balance, I needed both to be taught to me. So in the end, I didn't know that I could express anger in a healthy fashion, because anger in general was treated as not acceptable. Cassandra will hide from difficult emotions because she has come to expect that she won't be heard or validated in those feelings. So it was for me too. I struggled growing up to connect emotionally with my parents. My dad was so rational that my irrational self was hard to relate to, and he couldn't seem to fathom how he could compromise with me when things weren't as straightforward for me as they were for him. And my mom was more so in the other direction, to where it didn't necessarily help me regulate. And if there was a conflict, she would shut down and avoid it. And so my feelings wouldn't be validated in that way, and I'd be left with this unbearable pain inside that didn't make sense in any other way than that I must have been the one to blame, the reason for my own suffering. So at least in some circumstances, and especially when it came to conflict, I internalized and shut down, blaming myself for the pain I felt and giving up on trying to resolve things or share my emotions, let alone be heard.
Guess by now I ought to know my place. Do your humble duty with a smile on your face. Mother knows how much I love her, but she's always doing other things. So I'll keep waiting in the wings.
I crave so much, and yet I kept on waiting. One glance, one touch, and I just kept on waiting. And when it came with strings. So I kept waiting in the wings.
Cassandra is being taught here that love is conditional. She has to earn it. That people, even as important as her own parents, won't love her, regardless of what she does or doesn't do. But that she has to live in fear, the fear of falling short and not satisfying them, of being dependent on their whims rather than their commitment to love her as they should. She grew up finding that she rarely got any sort of love and respect unless she made herself useful to others. Even her own father, who actually does love her, even then she feels the need to impress him as well. And for me, thankfully, my parents have loved me unconditionally, but despite being told time and again that the God of the religion I was raised in also loves me unconditionally, for whatever reason, it never felt that way. It felt like it came with strings, even if I couldn't put my finger on them. And as we progress through Cassandra's story and talk about the people I run into later in life, well, the conditional love was unfortunately much more of a relevant aspect there. I think I should clarify that my original conception with the term unconditional love was more or less born out of a dogmatic view from the religion I was raised in. I think as a parent, there is, in a sense, a responsibility to love a child no matter what they do, at least as long as they're under your care, just so that they have the best chance at being a functional adult, both for their sake and society's. But I think it's important not to take that concept to a dogmatic degree. Any relationship really should be mutual. And if it's not, then you shouldn't feel a requirement to show the other person love or to feel love for them. Now, it would be unfair to say that I never felt like I received a glance or a touch of affection from my parents. They did show me that and more, even if I felt that in some ways my emotional needs were unmet. The real place where the silence stings would be in the relationship or lack thereof that I was promised with the Christian God. That there would be this indwelling spirit to strengthen me and comfort me, if not directly speak to me. And I craved that so much, especially in the pain I ran into later in life, yet I didn't get that glance or touch. I just got silence. Out of this childhood, Cassandra is left with a lack of validation, and so never learns to validate herself in her adulthood. This is a deep need that everyone has growing up, and if it's not met, then it leads to being dependent on others. desperately seeking them to meet that need instead of realizing that validating oneself is a practice that can and needs to be learned in order to have a healthy life. Cassandra's lack of emotionally reflective parents and her resulting rough exterior will further leave her without many, if any, to meet that need. Indeed, her desire for people to see that there is more in her is really a desire to be recognized, to make up for what she never got as a child. If she were recognized, she would have been heard and validated, not taken for granted, but potentially even understood. Obviously, one does not want to rely on such generalized external validation, but in my experience, since I wasn't good at validating myself, when I didn't have others giving me validation, I felt like I needed it. And I'd say that the further back you go, the younger I was, the more I really could have used and needed such external validation. Which indeed is Cassandra's upbringing, both directly in the parental realm and indirectly with her difficulty making friends. Not having needs met over the course of one's childhood is just as big of a trauma as a trauma born out of a horrific moment. In my own life, childhood trauma looked like a lot of things. It looked like excessive guilt and shame for things that I didn't need to feel any guilt or shame for. The faith I was in just seemed to foster all of the negative emotions and intensified them. I also did not have my emotional needs met. My parents loved me and cared for me, but they struggled to meet my emotional needs. Combine that with what I took away from how conflict was handled, and it felt like I kind of had emotionally unavailable parents. To be fair, my folks would try to comfort me, but for one reason or another, my emotions were just so overwhelming. Like it felt like nobody had the words to console me. Put all of this together, and I was left with an enslaving emotional void, crippling my self-esteem and confidence. It left me insecure and with a broken heart that was desperate to find the love I felt like I was missing. For Cassandra, this need and dependency will manifest itself primarily through asking others to trust her. Her desire for trust will be challenged by a lack of respect and acknowledgement. After all, if wishes are not respected or advice isn't being acknowledged and at least sometimes heeded, then it feels like others aren't giving trust and that they're not even listening. These childhood traumas really set the stage for the rest of my life, much like the traumas we see here set the stage for Cassandra's struggles for the rest of the story.
Rapunzel! Do me a favor, try not to run off like that. Not that I don't think you can handle yourself, but I promised your dad I'd keep you safe, and I'd hate to lose you less than a week on the road.
Has it been that long already?
You've got to exercise at least some caution out here. Trust me, Raps, the real world isn't all fun and games.
Come on, it's just a rat.
Get away! Evacuate the castle!
Let's go, little guy.
See that, Pascal? I told you she had a good heart. We're gonna be best friends yet. Hi.
Why is it so important to you, all right there on the temples, to be friends with Cassandra anyway?
Because she's real. Eugene, I spent 18 years of my life with someone who lied to my face. And here's Cassandra. Sure, yes, she may be a little rough around the edges, but she's forthright and honest and just...
We're still talking about Cassandra, right?
Rapunzel's ultimate reason for wanting to be friends with Cassandra is that she deeply appreciates Cassandra for being, as she says, real. This will be a theme that continues to play out over the series, the theme of authenticity, living your life, being true to yourself, and the freedom that brings.
What is this?
I couldn't help but feel like we've been a bit out of sync, so I figured what better way for two friends to reconnect than a sleepover?
Why can't you understand? We are not friends. I don't like dumb dance moves, or spirit bracelets, or sleepovers. My idea of having fun is not to have fun. Good night.
You're right. I was pushing too hard. Besides Pascal, I haven't made any friends in 18 whole years, so maybe I don't know how. I'll just leave you alone.
But this is my room. You know, I'm probably not that good at making friends either. I grew up with the captain of the guards for a father. He's not big on warm and fuzzy. I guess I got a lot to learn about being a friend.
Maybe we could learn together? Maybe I won't try so hard to be friends?
And I guess I could try harder not to be your friend. Hey, what do you say you help me clean my room, huh? Some weird princess made a mess of it.
This is where they actually meet in the middle. They bond over the fact that they are bad at making friends. I identify with Cassandra here too, in that I didn't really have a lot of friends growing up, and wasn't good at making them. When I finally stepped out into the world, I still didn't know how to choose and make friends. That resulted in me choosing dysfunctional friendships and even being some of the dysfunction myself.
Come now, darlings. Off to your new home.
Cass, I should have listened to you. I just wanted to show you.
Show me how to seize the moment? Here's what the moment got us. I know you take a lot of pride in your irrepressible, carefree spirit. It's what makes you you. But did you ever stop to think that maybe that attitude can be a bit selfish sometimes? I'm sorry. This trail of black rocks is your destiny, but I dropped everything to make sure you get to the end of it. I'm taking this seriously. Why aren't you?
I would argue you can use this episode to see how Cassandra is actually being somewhat codependent on Rapunzel. Why is Cassandra friends with Rapunzel? Part of it is to fulfill the emotional void left by her parents. Indeed, she has been starving for someone to trust and support her. But even with Rapunzel, that wasn't to be the case. Instead, Cassandra was over-investing beyond what Rapunzel had the wherewithal or ability to return, so much so that she was hurting herself with expectations that weren't being met. One potential pattern of codependency that I am all too familiar with is shown here. Specifically, taking on something that someone else cares about and taking it so much more seriously than them that it is counterproductive, if not hurts them. And now Cassandra is taking the journey too seriously in place of Rapunzel and making Rapunzel feel guilty for it. Rapunzel understandably starts feeling guilty after Cassandra points out the selfishness, but Cassandra's reasoning behind that is a bit distorted and only half fair. At a base level, perhaps Cassandra is right. It can feel like being spat on if you drop everything to help someone else and they just take it for granted. However, if the other person didn't agree to your help beforehand, then volunteering it when they didn't want it can become manipulative. If it's not volunteered selflessly, then the unspoken rule becomes, I'm doing something good for you, so you owe it to me to behave how I like, even though the other person never agreed to it and doesn't owe anything, which is really just the natural conclusion and pattern you come to when you're raised being taught that your value and chance to be loved is dependent on what you do, on whether or not you are useful or successful. I think in my darker days I would sometimes do this kind of manipulation, or at least harbor these kinds of unfair expectations. But perhaps my most parallel example to this moment in the show is how, when I was in the faith, I took it so seriously that I imposed it on others. Now we arrive at the Great Tree episodes, where the dysfunction that Cassandra finds herself in and contributing to is most clearly shown.
Raps, wait! It's too wide! You couldn't... that jump you and Max took?
Oh, you mean the jump that won us the race?
It wasn't a race.
But yeah, that one, it was kinda reckless.
Cass, you of all people should know I can handle myself pretty well out here. I don't need someone to keep me safe.
Rapunzel saying that she doesn't need someone to keep her safe cuts right to what Cassandra feels like is her purpose on this whole journey. Cassandra promised the king that she would keep Rapunzel safe. She has been feeling increasingly useless, wondering what duty is she really fulfilling on her journey if not to advise and protect Rapunzel. Here, similar to so many other times up to this point, Rapunzel is disregarding Cassandra's input and hardly even acknowledging it or even saying thank you. And this plays all too well into Cassandra's past. As we know, her mother didn't acknowledge her at all, except for when she was useful. Cassandra may be so deeply ingrained with the idea that her worth and worthiness of love is chained and equal to how useful she is to others, that it hurts her and the relationship she's in. Growing up, I wasn't taken seriously much. Like, it would have been nice for my ideas and suggestions to have been seriously considered, but even if I had just been listened to, mirrored back and validated, compromised with, just so that I knew I had been heard personally, if not technically or professionally, would have meant so much. I would have felt included and loved instead of overlooked and taken for granted.
Who was that man that attacked us?
And don't give us any of your cryptic runaround talk.
His name is Hector. And I don't think I appreciate your tone.
Oh, I'm sorry I gave you the impression I care about the things you appreciate.
All right. Who is Hector?
He's a member of the Brotherhood. A group of warriors sworn to keep any and all away from the Dark Kingdom.
We barely got away from this Hector with our lives, and now we're going to trust her and go through his home turf? I don't like it.
Well, like it or not, it's our only choice.
Your call, Blondie.
I'm going with Adira on this. Guys, let's go through that tree.
Fine. Look, Adira, you may have sold my friends on being the wise but kooky old mentor, but I'm not buying it. I'm watching you.
Well, if that's what you want, be my guest. But as a servant of the princess, isn't it your job to watch her?
I'm not a servant.
Oh, I thought that's what a lady-in-waiting was.
Cassandra is a very emotional person, and she wasn't raised learning good ways of dealing with or processing those emotions and validating herself. She's easily stirred up if her buttons are pushed. Understandably, she's stirred up by her suggestions regularly being shut down, all while Adira's advice and actions are accepted and appreciated. This is all compounded by Cassandra not being good at being self-aware. And boy howdy, was that where I was. It was painful being so butthurt and hurtful all the time, and while I was aware that I was being like that, I was hardly, if at all, aware of why I was, or that I could choose to do better. Now, what Adira says here puts it plainly for Cassandra, and I think Adira hits on something. It's easy for a relationship to stagnate in its origins instead of evolving with the people in it as they grow. Cassandra was introduced to Rapunzel as a lady-in-waiting, as a servant. Now, Rapunzel certainly isn't the type of person to see anyone as a slave with no freedom, but such a dynamic does lend itself to establishing a superiority and inferiority that can easily go beyond the professional and into the personal. In my own life, my princess-turned-friend was the man who I ended up clinging to as my discipler in the faith. He took on the role with me, as he would with others like me, of teaching me in the faith just as though we were brothers walking through life together. He was 7 years older than me, and I was a young man struggling with depression and thoughts of suicide. Both of these things formed a large part of the foundation of the relationship, not on friendship, but on power. I felt like I needed someone strong enough to keep me safe from myself, and he, as best I can figure now, needed someone to need him like that. When the good times deformed, or perhaps I should say when the facade of the friendship was laid bare to what was underneath, when his character was challenged or I stepped outside the lines of his control, then he defaulted to knowing the faith better than me, and I would crumple up obsequiously and or assume a more continuous mood of bitterness. At the time, I didn't realize how unhealthy that was. I was living that codependent, self-helpless vibe of like, I can't help myself, this person can help me, I feel safe around them. I don't know, man, it was a mess.
I suggest we camp out here for the night. No way! We are getting out of this tree as soon as possible. I'm not sure that's your call, kid.
Cass, we could use the rest.
Rapunzel, this place almost got us killed an hour ago.
And thankfully, I was there to prevent it.
You stay out of this, Adira!
Come on, Cass, listen to yourself.
Rapunzel, I'm telling you right now, we need to get out of this tree, but more importantly, we need to lose Adira before she gets us all killed.
I can't do that, Cass.
What do you mean you can't do that? Of course you can. Are you that obliviously naive that you can't see?
Enough, Cassandra! No one is getting rid of anyone. Is that clear?
Yes, Your Highness. I'll keep first watch.
This scene has been built up to with Cassandra's increasingly exposed and stressed insecurity. She has been trying to find and define her purpose and identity in protecting Rapunzel. However, this is repeatedly undermined by both Rapunzel's blithe overconfidence, brushing her input and help aside, and Adira's skill, proving greater and more useful than her own. This leaves Cassandra frustrated, jealous, and afraid that her very worth and identity may ultimately amount to nothing. All of these intensifying emotions finally boil over and put on anger as their mask. It's as if her emotions are kicking and screaming, trying to say, perhaps if I wear this mask I will finally be heard. I too was caught up in insecurity. I believed I was evil and so tried desperately to find my identity, worth, and purpose through religion. Even though it was that religion that had me believing I was evil. I ascribed to its tenets to convince myself they were real and was afraid of forsaking them, that it might mean I lose my community. In my own life, there have been people like the Discipler, people that I thought loved me more than anyone else, more than even my own family, or at least felt more effective in their love for me than my own family. But when these relationships were strained, the times when things that I was struggling with were issues between myself and the other people that we needed to work out, the times I needed to be heard the most, well, those confidences were never to be about me, or even about us. In those moments, my wants, needs, and advice were treated with triviality, if not taken with offense, stepped on, and thrown out or ignored altogether. This is perhaps one of the core ways I identify with Cassandra, and maybe one of the biggest things that first pulled me to her character even before I fully knew why. After all, when I first saw this series, I was still trusting myself to these people, who only cared about me as long as I didn't ask them to change. To be fair, I too was sloppy. Like Cassandra in conflict, I would be bitter, butthurt, whiny, and hurtful. I needed to express my emotions, but because of how I was raised, I hadn't learned how to do that in a healthy manner. Because of my emotional deficits growing up, when I discovered these people who were willing to talk freely about feelings, I latched on, and I thought I was safe and healing and growing. But while that last one may have been true in some ways, it didn't take long until I got my first burnt hand, as it were. And from then on, everything was tainted, and I lived under the shadow of an ever-growing fear that if I did anything they didn't like, then they might come down hard on me. I wish I could have seen and said all of this so clearly then, but Yeah.
Raps, wait! You can't do that incantation again!
I don't have a choice, Cass.
Please, Raps, that spear can kill it. Let me try and grab it. Trust me.
Eugene! I have to do this.
No!
End this destiny. Break these earthly chains and set the spirit free.
I got this, Cass. Go! You heard her. Let's go. No, I'm not leaving her. Raps, please let go.
I can't control it.
I could have stopped it. You should have let me try.
For me, the symbolism of Cassandra getting her hand burnt conveys the severity of emotional abuse. When I was still trying to live in the faith, I found myself pulled toward people I thought were most earnestly living it out themselves, like my discipler. He would listen to me when I was being butthurt about the world and offer me advice, and I would find that comforting, but my first burnt hand moment with him, I can see now how it was just manipulation and control. Even though my gut certainly tried to warn me, for some reason I didn't listen to it. I should have listened to my gut, but I wanted to believe that a relationship could be beautiful enough, that we had a close enough and safe enough relationship to confide in each other the things that we didn't like about each other. I literally had the thought of like, okay, this is a chance to trust this person with this. Even as my gut was saying, you shouldn't trust him with this. I was a young man trying to move out of his parents' house, and I found these really cool people, including my discipler and his folks, who I thought, hey, maybe I could move in with them. So I had mentioned that I was thinking about it, and then I decided against it because I was like, my gosh, I should have stopped immediately when he said, may I ask why? That's when my gut really panged for me to not go further with the conversation. But yeah, I kind of like Cassandra did. I said to myself, I'm going to trust this person because that's what friends do. I'm going to trust him with something I don't like about him, and I guess we'll talk it out and it'll be better. It was not. I expressed to him how I had recognized that he was, as I saw it at the time, a stronger personality than me, and that while I liked being friends, I figured that that might be a bit too much to be around as often as living together would entail. His response was just like, what? Something to the effect of he couldn't fathom that reason, that it was just such a stupid reason to him. He went off on me for that, basically yelling, not rabidly yelling at me, but certainly yelling for what I could process emotionally, or rather, couldn't process. You know, I was crying by the end of it. After he cooled down a little bit from his initial outbursts, he sort of listened to me, but I can recognize now that he had just switched over to his 800-pound gorilla in the room routine. His eyes were glaring at me as if to communicate to me that he was still angry and annoyed at me for being, I guess, irrational. They were not sorrowful eyes that expressed sympathy, if not regret, for me being overwhelmed. Like I woke up the next morning just feeling broken. I stared out the window for 2 hours in a stupor. What had happened that night was not right. Perhaps it's good I'm revisiting this because I've healed a lot since then and I can validate myself fully now. I can acknowledge that what happened was not right, not okay, that I was hurt. But also, I can realize that I don't in any way want to hold on to the hurt or build my identity on the idea of being the wronged one. If I hold on to a position as the wronged one, that will just disempower me. encourage me to harbor feelings that are going to keep me in fear and anger. Thankfully, I've gotten mostly past those feelings, but perhaps this final closing sentence or paragraph or whatever was needed. Rapunzel was never really abusive or manipulative, but being burned, living in someone else's shadow really resonates with me. It resonates both in my general experience and keenly in this moment where I was yelled at for simply trying to express to the other person how I wanted to do something different than how they wanted to, because I saw that we wouldn't be a good match as roommates. My body is still probably going to carry the scars, but I recognize that my old discipler was not a demon, dare I say not even evil. I can see now that he was just reacting because of the patterns he learned and not overcome. He was just living out a sad fate. That doesn't excuse what he did, but I also don't need to hang on to the hurt or justify anything about myself with it.
Oh, Cass, your hand. Are you okay?
Yes, I'm fine.
Are you sure?
I said I'm fine.
But you're hurt.
I know. And it won't happen again.
So, what now?
It's your call, Raps.
Cassandra is forlorn. She has finally gotten what she wanted, for Rapunzel to leave her alone when she's hurt and doesn't want to talk about it. Yet part of her is sorrowful, perhaps grief-stricken at the loss of the friendship she thought they had. She had been living a lie. She had been trying to think of Rapunzel as someone she could trust with her input and perhaps even her feelings someday. But that veneer has been stripped away, and the desperate hope for that precious dream to be real, even though it hardly ever was, is now felt as lost. But this is needed to happen because it broke the codependent bond, the real enslavement they were stuck in, of Rapunzel needing someone to make happy and Cassandra feeling like she needed someone to validate her. I suffered for a long time, desperate to believe in what I was taught in the faith. There were supposed to be all of these beautiful things, a beautiful hope to be rewarded, beautiful dreams to be fulfilled, beautiful relationships to be had. But when I finally had my second burnt hand moment, which I'll talk about later, I had to wake up to all of the misgivings, doubts, and suspicions that my gut had been screaming at me all along. Then I was finally able to stop making excuses for my painful friendships and accept what my gut was telling me, to respect myself and move on into a healthier life where I wasn't looking for others to meet my needs they couldn't fulfill. I discovered that I didn't need to be dependent on a person or system of beliefs to save me from myself. There was more in me than I had been able to give myself credit for. I had the strength in myself to grow and seek out the help that I actually needed to heal. This moment with Cassandra's hand getting burnt was one that was long coming. It needed to be this extreme in order for her to wake up. She needed to see that she was over-investing in her friendship with Rapunzel so much that it was hurting her. She has been trying to have a friendship with and be heard by Rapunzel in ways deeper than Rapunzel is able to recognize and reciprocate. The hard reality was that she wasn't being heard or respected by the person she was hoping to have those things from the most. After saying that her getting hurt will never happen again, Cassandra dons armor, symbolizing her physically and emotionally walling herself off from others, especially Rapunzel. This is Cassandra naturally setting the boundaries she needs. This is sealed by her saying that it is Rapunzel's call as to what to do next. Normally, when Rapunzel has to choose a direction for the party, it is Eugene who trustingly says this line after Cassandra has offered her input, But here, Cassandra's recitation of it is definitely colder, more mechanical, less loving, and serving to distance herself from Rapunzel. It shows that she is letting go of her expectations of being heard and respected. It signals how she has resigned to be not a friend, but a servant, not to be heard, but to follow, to listen without expecting her input to be listened to. Boy, I did not put this in the note. This is true spontaneous right here. Like, that is really a good encapsulation of how I felt in the faith. I kept praying, desperate to believe in it, and I had to wake up how I was just hurting myself trying to live out the expectation that it was real. And it's crazy because when I was leaving the faith behind, I also deeply felt that grief, having to let go of that dream of something that I was desperate for it to be beautiful, but had to have the painful realization that, for me at least, it was unbearably hollow. Now, while Cassandra will end up playing the role of the anti-villain, to me, she is an anti-hero. Her heroism is in setting the boundaries and taking the space she needs. She champions this and becomes an example, a beacon of such to those too lost, confused, or too timid, or too desperate to take care of themselves. It sets the stage for healthy relationships and self-image, and it's the strength and path I needed to take to start finding my destiny. The boundary setting is a heroic act because it is a good and important act that takes courage to do, especially in the face of manipulative individuals who use fear, guilt, shame, and gaslighting to bully others into submission. It is implied that Cassandra is doing the thing where you put up walls to a fault and probably won't let anyone in, but it was a first step to putting up healthy boundaries, and sometimes going a bit far with that at first is what it takes. Even that's okay, unless, of course, it goes too far to the point of hurting others, and even then, although regrettable, it can still be redeemable and leaves one in a better place, as we will see by the series' end. For the longest time, that was something I couldn't dream of practicing, but ultimately, it was what I needed to do. It was the next step I needed to take in order to start finding myself and my independence, by getting away from the shadow of overbearing personalities. Now, unfortunately, while Cassandra has this realization, she still has a little ways further to go, and while that does make for an interesting story, it does leave her vulnerable, as she has still not worked through everything that's led up to this point, and she's just realized how what she was trying to do wasn't working for her. Looking forward in the series, this insidiously pushes Cassandra towards Xantiri as the ghost girl, because there is someone who comes along and does acknowledge Cassandra's emotions, and how sad it is when she gets this at long last. It's just from somebody who wants to use that power over her.
You were right. Rapunzel did know that Gothel loved me.
You poor thing. But now you know, and that knowledge will only make you stronger.
Where is she? Where is the princess? No one's going to harm you, little one. You're safe with me.
I want my mama. I'm sorry that happened to you, Cassandra. Sometimes the most painful truths are the most difficult to remember. You've always felt outshined by Rapunzel, haven't you?
And you always will, unless...
Unless?
Cassandra has been trying to get a need met that she's not going to find in anyone else, really, because it's a hole in her childhood. When Zantiri comes along pretending to validate those needs, Cassandra also gives up too much power. Cassandra feels like she's finally being listened to and supported, and so gives up her caution and follows Zantiri's manipulations blindly. Much the same thing was what drew me initially to the Disciplers, that, unlike my family, they were open to talking about emotions, and I felt validated. But that had a darker side to it that I found out as time went on. This emotional manipulation of Zantiri's, inciting Cassandra's anger and frustration, reminds me of one of the moments like that I went through. It really resonates with how Zantiri later says, "I'm playing her, Rapunzel. She has no idea." I read a text by one of my old manipulators that was basically yelling at me because they heard I was wavering on whether or not I'd stick in the faith. It rang with the sentiment of yelling at me that I wasn't allowed to get off that easy. And I just felt such anger that I felt pulled. I felt out of control. I felt like I had to go see them. Like, I think it's important to at least believe, if not know, that there is always a choice. It just really didn't feel like it at the time. So I drove over to their place, not exactly sure what I wanted to do. I guess I wanted to confront them, but I didn't feel like I was in control of myself. It felt like something else was in control. I had given up that power, apparently without even realizing it. And I was being run by my emotions. This anger against them for being angry at me, for invalidating my journey, for just doing what I needed to do. The sad thing is, once I got there, I just went back into shutdown mode. I didn't get any catharsis of having my own go off on them moment. I just listened to them talking. Although now, while I don't want to say I'm glad that I felt powerless, looking back on it now, I'm glad that I didn't go off on them, as that would have just been playing their game and letting them win, letting them have control, not just over what I didn't do, but also what I did do. My time there that day wasn't very long. It was amicable, but only because it was like a good cop, bad cop thing, you know. Having been yelled at through the text, now I was being further cowed by this loving reception. And that's just hella manipulative. So yeah, I didn't let on that I was leaving the faith or whatever. Probably for the best there too. When it came time to leave, I somehow ended up hugging them. Sometimes it feels like I can't understand what's happening in a social interaction, good or bad, until I've gotten away from it and had time to reflect. That has been especially true in leaving the manipulative relationships behind, where it wasn't just something I needed to reflect on once, but a deep fog that I needed to sort through and almost had to wait for it to clear. I realized that conversation was bad. At the end of it, they told me this twisted sentiment along the lines of, "I care about you as a motherly figure, so if you try to walk away from the faith, I'm gonna come after you for your own good." Once I had later remembered that, I was like, yeah, no, I'm never going back. Why would I go back when there was no reasoning with them? There was no reasoning with me when I was emotionally charged by them. So I'm not going to play the game anymore.
I can't control it.
You will, Cassandra, in time.
I thought by taking the Moonstone my destiny would become clear. But what if I don't even have a destiny?
Of course you do. It is to destroy Rapunzel.
Destroy Rapunzel?
Cassandra thought that by getting the Moonstone, her destiny would become clear. But she's just frustrated by further ambiguity, and she doubts her destiny. Her destiny doesn't become clear because it was never her destiny to begin with, just as Christianity was never my path either. Similarly, I thought the faith would make sense of my own life, but I just got ambiguity and confusion, not clarity.
There must be another way.
You once questioned why you had no destiny. Now that you have one, don't question it. You must wield the power of the Moonstone and the Sundrop, but you cannot do that without destroying Rapunzel.
Now this feels like a twisting of words here when Zantiri says, "You once questioned why do you have no destiny." Cassandra isn't so much questioning it as just why she wasn't getting her shot at it. She seemed convinced that she had one. It was practically on the level of entitlement. It's been the source of conflict that she at least wanted to believe it. Cassandra hasn't found what's true to her yet, and so is kind of sloppily flailing around trying to find it. Her search is made worse by someone pretending to hand it to her on a silver platter when really it's just what they want and not what she wants or needs. I wanted to believe the faith was real, and that caused its own problems. Especially once the people who were trying to disciple me offered their twisted version of it as if I could put my hope in it. In the end, I just ended up mostly suffering in my inauthenticity, trying to be something I'm not, and even occasionally hurting others because of it.
Do you want to explain to me how this got here? Back at Gothel's, I thought Rapunzel was hiding the one memory that proved my mother loved me. And you manipulated that memory, didn't you? You took this piece out. You tricked me into abandoning Rapunzel.
Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply pushed you to become what you were always meant to be.
Who are you?
What we see here is much like what happened with my old discipler, who had this mentality that they were being kind by not being nice, and that they were ordained by their God-given nature to yell at people, to be an instigator, and hurt people. The parallel is that they saw themselves as the one who was supposed to push people into becoming what they were supposed to be. They would justify it as if they were a doctor having to put a patient through temporary intense pain in order to, say, set a broken bone. No! I reject that. What they did was just wrong and not helpful or loving. I am a sensitive person, and by sensitive I don't mean easily offended. Rather, to borrow a boxing terminology, I'm like a lightweight, sensorily speaking. One can't yell at me without it overwhelming my ability to process, and without it hurting me. I've since accepted that it's okay to be sensitive. The difference between sensitive me then, under that discipleship, and me now isn't a thicker skin, although I have gained a bit of that, but strength. I have the strength now to say no, that's not okay, and to set boundaries because I've learned that lesson the hard way.
You're that ancient demon Zantiri?
Oh, quit pretending you're horrified. We're not so different, you and I. We were both cheated out of our destinies. In fact, we're more like sisters than you and Rapunzel ever were. We even want the same thing, and we can get it if you continue to let me help you.
No, I'm nothing like you. Just because I'm pursuing my destiny doesn't make me a bad person.
Doesn't it? Run, Cassandra, but you can't run from who you are.
I was taught that apart from the Christian God, my destiny was condemnation because my core nature was evil. Framing things this way incites fear and makes one want to run more or break under one's worst fears of becoming such a monster. When someone is trying to manipulate you, one way they might do that is by trying to convince you that what is inside of you is evil, that you need their help, and no one else will be able to help you, that you are lost without their help. The version of faith I was raised in taught me that I can do no good apart from its God, The same God to whom my good deeds were as filthy as used tampons. I was taught that my heart is wicked above all things. How could I even know what it was up to? I basically learned to fear my own heart, my own thoughts, and my own emotions. So yeah, that wasn't great. Having my source of fear within myself, and what was more, having it based on a false premise so I could only guess at what it is, and there was supposed to be nothing I could do about it other than call on a God who didn't seem to be there for me. My anxiety thrived within that ambiguity and inaction. After all, what action could I do when no one can know the heart and one can't be good apart from this God? I felt helpless, and it was like I was supposed to stay that way, trusting that a God was going to come along and change it. But if some God didn't do that, if there wasn't a God there to do that, then I was screwed. Having not felt such a helping hand, I ended up hating myself.
Cassandra! Wait!
To stop now. Whatever it is that you're going through, we'll fix it together, me and you, just like we've always done. No, this has to stop now. This thing where you think that you've been my friend and don't even hear how you condescend the way you've always done.
Here we have Cassandra finally laying it all out for Rapunzel. It's unfortunate that it comes out this way in a dominating musical number instead of mutual respect and discussion, but it does give insight into the fullness of Cassandra's pain. Cassandra's opening line, "That was my life for 10 years. I was supposedly friends with my discipler, a man 7 years older than me who took on the role of mentoring me in his faith or discipling me. But I've since realized that this was a guise, perhaps not just to myself, but him as well. What was really happening was that he thought that he knew what was good for me better than I did. I'm not saying that as a young man I had a great idea of what was best for me, but if he were loving me, then he would empower me to discover who I could be. He wouldn't tell me who I was supposed to be, but he did, and doing so was condescending. It cut off my chance for personal autonomy, undermined my self-esteem and confidence from being able to grow, required my submission, stifled my boldness, and created a power dynamic where I had to either trust him to a fault, to a point where I was in denial of reality, or fear him and not know how much I could trust him because he might just decide what I was doing wasn't what was best for me. My advice and input was secondary, not equal to his. I was expected to be humble, which is used in this case as just another word for a doormat, i.e., don't fight back against what I'm saying. Don't contradict what I tell you that you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to do. That is, be a pushover for my sake, submit and get in line. And there's also perhaps the more real dynamic there of they're just kind of fragile egos and want to be in control of you more than wanting you to be what you're supposed to be. One night, the nonprofit my discipler ran was hosting a concert. While I would normally volunteer at such events, this time I went to a movie with my at-the-time girlfriend. Later, the discipler did his 800-pound gorilla in the room routine with me and tried to almost discipline me by saying, "Hey, you need to be a spiritual leader for this girl and you should have been at the show." When really, he just wanted to be in control. At least, that's the best for what I can see it now. And that's really condescending. He thought he knew better than me, even though he was older and might have or might not have had some more wisdom than me. It still did not make it his place to take on a condescending tone or use it to manipulate me.
So before another line gets crossed and everything we've had is lost, just wait.
Wait? No, I won't wait.
Even now we have this interlude where Cassandra one last time entertains Rapunzel's entreaties to reconciliation of the friendship. Unfortunately, Rapunzel chooses the one word that triggers Cassandra: wait. This is nobody's fault. It's a natural thing to say in this case, and if Cassandra had been less manipulated and had had more time to self-reflect, she might have brushed this one off and moved forward in productive conversation. But she is literally huffing and puffing while standing still, just because Rapunzel said wait. That's a trauma response, one which, in my own way, I know all too well.
There's a line between the winners and the losers. There's a line between the chosen and the rest.
Here, Cassandra is obviously speaking, firstly, of the fact that, since Rapunzel is the princess, she finds herself to be a servant. These roles ascribe notions of personal value and self-esteem. For Rapunzel, it is nothing but exaltation as a royal daughter. But for Cassandra, the subservience and demeaning nature of her role, though not intended by Rapunzel, is keenly felt. She was always to come second to the princess. In my own life, the parallel of these roles played out in large part through religion. I was taught that I deserved death because I was supposedly hopelessly evil, and I owed my life to a God who, I found, gave me no aid and no ear. It has made me feel insane when people I know, and indeed people I love dearly, my own family, can swear that they know a higher power personally and have been helped by it. And yet I, who desperately tried to believe in and called on this power in so many bitter, painful moments, got nothing but silence. For apparently I was not among the beloved. I was on the loser's side of the line. My lot was cast in, not with the chosen, but the rest.
And I've done the best I could, but I've always known just where we stood. Me here with the luckless, you there with the blessed.
I desperately tried to live out the faith, but subconsciously, my gut always knew something was off. It knew that even though we were supposedly all equal, according to the religion, I was still on the outs and to be subservient to others. I should note that there were definitely some narcissistic people involved that convoluted and compounded everything, but at the end of the day, it was the religious ideas that were what was used, what stuck in my head, what manipulated me. Though I don't presume it was intended by most, if any, of the people who taught them to me, I can see now how these ideas primed me for toxic relationships. The idea alone that I ultimately can't help myself from being evil and need a God to help me to do that, that alone set me up for codependency. Even though the religion said we were all equal, there was nonetheless that power dynamic there of like, oh, they are your elders, they know better, they are more spiritually mature than you. I think I always did know deep down that none of it was real to me, and that if it was real to these other people, then I was desperately clinging on to a community that wasn't meant for me. I wasn't part of them as they thought I was, as I hoped I was, as I convinced myself I was. It didn't help that I was raised in it, so it was a lot harder to have the perspective I needed to see what was going on in the midst of it. I had to learn the hard way, unfortunately. I had to be brought to a breaking point of realizing it wasn't working for me, that I was in a living hell instead of living for heaven, and I needed to break away for my own health and happiness. I needed to break away for the health and happiness of others too, because that convoluted psychological mess that I was in just inclined me to hurt others. It was hard to rise above my circumstances while I was in the midst of them. My actions, though influenced, were still my responsibility, even if the only thing I could do to honor that responsibility was to seek to remove myself from those circumstances and influence so that it was not so difficult to be the person I want to be, dare I say, the good person I am.
How I've tried to jump that great divide, but I've never got the chances you were given.
Indeed, I tried in many ways to cross that great divide, as it were, but for now, here's one. I believed that I was divinely called, along with everyone else in the faith, to help those in need. I also see now that it was also a bit of a dysfunctional behavior to want to help others because I felt like I hadn't gotten enough help myself growing up. Put those two together and I tried so hard to live out that call. My breaking point was when I found a sad young man living in an abusive home, and I did everything I could to try and help him and disciple him as I had been discipled into being a better person, including moving out with him so that I could get him out of that abusive house. I might have been tempted enough to do this without religion by the dysfunctional half of my motivations that I mentioned earlier, but I'm not sure. I know I was also frustrated by how many of my fellow believers didn't seem to actually be doing much to help others anyway. But all along, my attempt at discipling wasn't so much dominated by sincerity as it was fear. Primarily the fear of losing my community. I was afraid that if I didn't strive to fit in and to do what they were doing, or what I thought we were all supposed to be doing anyway, by loving others for Christ's sake, that I wouldn't belong or fit in and be cast out. But there was also another fear. I was taught that God would discipline me to correct my behavior, that this was out of love to spare me the destruction that would result if I were allowed to fulfill my supposedly evil desires. But instead of being comforted by this love, it felt more like I was afraid of punishment, of vindictive wrath with no practical intent for instruction. I was afraid that the consequences for my wrongdoings would be way out of proportion to whatever offense I might commit. These fears were constantly looming over me. If there was any sincerity to my discipling of this young man, it was because I wanted the faith to be true. I wanted my faith to be confirmed. There was a desperate hope that by living it out, I would see it made real. Even when I was frustrated that others around me didn't seem to be living it as if it was real, I hoped that at least I could be a manifestation of it. Complicating matters greatly, and ultimately forcing me to wake up, was the fact that this young man, and now roommate, was abusive to me. He would yell at me if I did something that he didn't like, or even if I didn't do something he was wanting me to do. This included trivial stuff like not spending time with him. Even though I was spending a lot of time with him, just trying to be a friend and a spiritual mentor, I tried to include him on most of the weekly activities that I was already doing, trying to better myself, in the hopes that he would take advantage of those opportunities as well. Indeed, we ended up spending much more time together than was healthy for any sort of friendship or relationship even. He wanted something from me that I couldn't give him. He wanted a husband. And so I lived for months in fear, not just fear of some god which I had already been living in before the roommate, but increasingly terror of my new roommate. It got to the point of petrification. I constantly calculated my actions for fear that I would do something to upset him. It was like there was a lion lurking inside of him, starved and waiting for the perfect time to ambush me for whatever meat I had left on my withering form. His outbursts of yelling at me were like a 2-year-old throwing tantrums, but instead of just being annoying, They were frightening because they had the full power of a grown adult behind them. They overwhelmed me and genuinely hurt me emotionally. In the face of this, I tried to live out what I was taught. Don't get angry. Be the bigger person. You can take it, and God will give you the strength to get through it, and He will heal you from it later. The only time the roommate acknowledged that he might have done something wrong was when I was so frustrated with him that I was huffing and puffing. Though still holding it back and trying to be the bigger person. If only I had known in my heart that measured anger is actually good. It is how you tell others you need them to back off. You need your personal space. I wish I had validated myself in this enough to allow myself to use my anger and actually put myself first. Anyways, after months of growing dread, terror, and petrification, one night I started having fitful impulses to kill myself. This was in the midst of another one of our discussions, which was really just another manipulation where he would try to carry on the conversation until I capitulated. Even if he didn't make any new points, he would just try to keep it going until I gave in. However, this time he actually did say that I could go, move out and leave him. It's sad that I felt like I needed his permission. I know now I always have had the right to self-agency, but I nonetheless did take that step for myself and leave the next morning. At last I thought it was over, that I was free and I could start healing. But then he called and tried to desperately plead for me to come back. He tried to give me reasons and compromises that didn't make sense and wouldn't work. I told him that if I was going to come back, I would need space first. For some reason, I just could not plainly tell him no. I was too scared. I didn't feel like it would be a good idea to drive, so I had my folks pick me up, and when I got out of the car, I walked to the side of their house and fell into the grass exhausted. It was practically, if not actually, a panic attack. I felt as though it was never going to end. I would never escape that hell. I could only see one way out. While in my struggles with mental health throughout my life, which, side note, since leaving the roommate and the religion behind and all of that religious community, and doing some more work with my psychiatrist and psychologist, those struggles are comparatively almost non-existent now. They're still there, but it's crazy how good life is now. While in my struggles, I had often had to wrestle with impulses or intrusive thoughts of harming myself, or more often taking the final escape. This was the first and thankfully only time in which I actually took action. I was on my way to do something, maybe just a half measure, yet quite possibly the whole. But my mom was there, and I was just so exhausted by that point that I did not have the resolve to carry through. My dad offered to talk to the roommate for me and tell him to stop trying to contact me. All of that to say, aside from for anyone else who has had similar experience, you're not alone. All of that to say that I tried, but I never got that indwelling personal relationship with peace and power that preachers and teachers, friends and family said their God's book promised. That divine support that was supposed to get me through that hell and to have gotten me through it with purpose, not the pointless pain I got. If I really had been in spiritual warfare, as it was called, then I was desperately trying to believe that I had been sent to charge the enemy head on the front lines, only to find that I was alone in no man's land, surrounded by barbed wire, mines, and incoming shells, without so much as a pistol or a knife, and certainly no backup or air support. I was not given the chance that others said they were.
You don't know how much I've been denied. Well, I'm not being patient anymore.
Cassandra has been denied both a mother and at least a biological dad. In Rapunzel's shadow, she has been denied respect and the chance to shine. She also believes that she has been denied her destiny. I was similarly denied my needs. I was denied healthy friendships. I was denied autonomy, self-esteem, and peace, which, at least when it comes to those last two, funnily enough, I've actually found those now after leaving the faith and unhealthy found family behind. I was denied years of my life. It came to a point where I had to do what I should have done all along and assert myself for my own sake. And now we get into the extended lyrics that had to be cut for time when making the show. I have stopped trying to fit in and started being my authentic self. I broke away from those who held me back and put me in their box. I let go of the ideas and stories I had been taught that ate away at who I really am. I realized that I am not evil, and so I don't have to be afraid of myself, but rather I can trust my own judgment. I can figure out rules for myself that respect myself and others, and I can validate myself in that. If others will not respect me likewise, then I don't need to let them have any influence over me, for I am my own person. I'm free now knowing that I do not need other people's okay to take control of my life, choosing who I want to be and what I want to do with my life. I was a fool for believing and submitting to so much that wasn't real to me, especially when it was being used by other people to blow up their own egos, and that often at my own expense. I was a fool for trying to be someone I wasn't. How many unending lines would it be fair to say I was waiting in? The line to get to heaven? The feel the Holy Spirit line? The stop being depressed line? The have the person I want the most from emotionally actually listen to me where I can feel completely safe around them? Safe talking about anything with them, including stuff I don't like about them, and that I wonder if they would be willing to change because they love me or not? That line, 'cause boy howdy, I tried to change for whatever they imposed on me. Anyways, there are plenty of lines I felt like I had to, or at least was expected to toe. If not by a god, then at least by believers. Indeed, I took it seriously when I was taught that the Bible was God's word, and so should be followed completely. So if you name any given religious virtue from Christianity, you'll likely land on one that I felt burdened under. To me, I emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually thought that I was supposed to put others before myself, and it destroyed me. That was what led me, in large part, into the toxic roommate situation. The had to part of this verse is particularly stinging because I felt like I had to. Even beyond warnings of condemnation, I felt like I had to out of fear, guilt, and shame. These were all emotions that I was told my religion would relieve me of, but for me it somehow only reinforced them. I would do the right thing, but it wasn't so much about earning my way to heaven. Why did I use the word earning there? That's going off script here because because I was like always taught in the particular branch of Christianity I found myself in that you can't earn your way to heaven, that it's all Jesus' doing and you just accept it as a gift. So why did I put earning there? Is that what it felt like? I would do the right thing, but it wasn't so much about earning my way to heaven as it was just trying to avoid further punishment with more of those emotions. I was taught that if I prayed, believed, and served, that I would at least be strengthened to get through life and my difficult emotions, if not actually given respite and healing from them. But no such aid came. Life only started being good when I put myself first and took care of myself. I regret how I hurt others, but I am glad to know that I have moved on from that and will no longer have my vision clouded by things that aren't true to me. This lyric brings up feelings in me that make me want to exclaim to religion and manipulative people, "You don't want another line crossed, but you've drawn so many. I have to cross lines. I have nowhere to step." Being raised in a Christian faith, I found many lines, and hindsight has revealed all the more how blurry they were. For example, the teaching that you can do whatever and you're forgiven, but don't do whatever because you're forgiven. When I was still trying to be a Christian, I would have defended teachings like that by bringing up nuances, but now those nuances seem to just blur the lines further and make me want to disregard the teachings all the more. I think back now on reading the Bible for myself and can see how it's not explicit on many of the questions I could have on how I should live my life. Yet it still seems to be drawing lines that I was supposed to figure out the sides of and then figure out how to be on the correct side of. Now, unseen lines? That part played out more so through people, especially those who would manipulate me. They would go off on me or around me and then just justify it by the seat of their pants. So I never knew when I was going to cross a line they didn't like being crossed. So out of fear of being hurt, I would try and predict and avoid those lines, but if I were to cross one, then they would just hurt me and then blame me for how I felt hurt. They were lines that she felt like she had to learn to read between. That is what I had to do when living with my old roommate. Like, okay, yeah, you feel sorry and you don't like that we are not happy right now, but like, it's not going to sink in for you, is it? And then so many boundaries, far more than you know. It's like, I was so tied up in guilt and shame and fear, like, just to be safe from those emotions growing and overwhelming me, hurting me even more, I felt I had to assume new lines that if I crossed them, I would be punished for. So I created lines for myself and ended up in a hell greater than anyone else. Like, I didn't know how other people walk in the faith, as they say, because it felt like my personality was not the same as everybody else who did. There's all these people with a different personality who just don't seem to be bothered by all of these lines. Earlier in their adventures, Rapunzel said, "That's why I'm glad we approached our relationship on mutual respect and built a solid rapport." That's the line that Rapunzel thinks connects her and Cassandra, but Cassandra's not falling for it anymore because Rapunzel hasn't been showing that she's listening beyond in-the-moment apologies. For me, the line would be religion. A believer might say, "Hey, we're all of this faith. we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and maybe it's real to them, but if it's not real to me, then for me to try and live by it is basically just falling for it. Worse is if it's a manipulative person on the other end, then they'll use religion as a through line to make me feel guilty so that I will keep on coming back. Indeed, when I was living in those shadows, it was very much the pattern that I would come back to them, mostly because of their imposing shame on me, and more generally to the religion for the hope of promised freedom from guilt. But that didn't really happen. I found myself in relationships like the one with the discipler, and some others where I was really confused as to what the hell was going on. It was not until I got some real distance from those relationships that I was able to reflect on them and see what was going on, to have my eyes open to the issues that were clouding my vision and hurting me, issues that I was either clueless of or in denial over or was being gaslit on. Whatever the case, I needed space to discover the truth about all of it, and to find the strength to stand up for myself. Trapped by lines that you never had to live in, one obvious such line that Cassandra was trapped by would, of course, be the line of being a servant to the princess. For me, it was the lines the disciplers had for who they thought I was supposed to be. They would say the lines were the same for me as for them, but that wasn't the case. There were also such lines that weren't even necessarily set by other people either. Like I said before, how the guilt, fear, and shame, and fear of overdone punishment which was mainly achieved through those emotions, I was so afraid of a God giving me excessive punishment for doing wrong that whatever I did wrong or not, my emotions just punished me regardless. This was confusing because that God was supposed to give me relief from those emotions, and I didn't get it. So, was that God even there? Not for me. I thought my old discipler was on my side. I thought and was taught that the faith meant we were all on each other's side and were supposed to submit to each other accordingly, even when I was struggling with how things they were doing would hurt me. He would listen to me when I was being butthurt about the world and offered me advice, which I found comforting, but in the midst of that was also my burnt hand moment with him, the one I talked about earlier back at the Great Tree, a moment which really put me into a darker shadow than even Cassandra had to deal with. Now for the rest of the song, I think this excerpt from a performance of mine explains what those lines mean to me pretty well.
I'm crossing the line, and I'm done holding back. So look out, clear the track, it's my turn. I'm taking what's mine. Every drop, every smidge. If I'm burning a bridge, let it burn. But I'm crossing the line. And for us, if we're over the time, I'm crossing the line.
If the people I thought loved me aren't listening to me, then I don't have to wait for them to wake up. I can still listen to myself and all those things I was trying to tell them and they were not hearing. I heard all of it. I had to realize that if someone wasn't listening to me, then waiting around for them to start listening to me wasn't going to work. I realized that I needed to leave the other people behind. I needed to know that I hear myself and am listening to myself, my gut, and my heart. Similarly, On my way out from the faith, the thing that I was still desperately clinging on to was this relationship that I was supposed to have with this God. Yet, in the depth of the pain and lack of support I felt with the roommate situation, it became clear to me that there was no one listening there either, and that I was just hurting myself all the more with the expectation that someone was listening and working all things for my good. At the end of the day, if I'm not at least getting that sort of support, that Holy Spirit that Jesus himself, according to the Gospels, promised, if I can't tell any difference between talking to a wall or talking to this God, then to try and keep having faith, as it were, is just gaslighting myself. What I can tell best for myself is that no one's there listening. Maybe it's real to other people. It seems to be. But that's not for me to judge or say. I just know my own story. And I know that I must go this way. Cassandra came to the point where she knew further talk would not help, so she broke things off with Rapunzel. Regrettably, she did it in a rather hurtful manner. She didn't have the tools, identity, or confidence to handle it well. Nonetheless, it was something she needed to do. Since Rapunzel wasn't listening, she stopped trying to be heard. I have learned that sometimes the people I have loved the most did not love me as well. Sometimes they did love me, but they were wrestling with their own demons that got in the way of that. I learned that I needed to separate myself from those people. It wasn't easy. It was hard. It was sad. It was heartbreaking and infuriating. But I've learned that at the end of the day, I don't need to let anyone keep hurting me. From now on, when I tell someone how they've hurt me, they will either apologize and genuinely change to love me better, or they won't change, and then I will be entirely within my rights to respect myself, to set boundaries, and to distance myself from them as much as I need to for my own health and happiness, even if that means cutting them out of my life entirely. It's not easy, it's hard, but it's worth it. It is also a source of peace for me to know that my story is not unique in this regard. I am not alone in not being the best at taking the time and space I need to reflect and set boundaries. I also find consolation in how Cassandra's story shows that I don't need to be condemned for having been a bit messy about all of it. Some of what I did is regrettable, sure, but not irredeemable.
Cass, trust me, becoming the villain isn't the answer.
Is that what you think I am?
Nothing Left to Lose doesn't resonate with me that much. Thankfully, after breaking away from the relationships that weren't good for me, I took a path bathed in more light than Cassandra did. However, it nonetheless offers balance in the face of how Cassandra has been taking things too far. So I still want to touch on some things.
Cassandra, you're angry, I get it. Believe me, I know what it's like. But you are making a mistake. The path of hate is a dangerous track. You take one step and it's hard to turn back. It pulls you along, and though it seems wrong, it feels right.
In the opening verses, Varian empathizes with Cassandra by expressing how he knows what it's like to be angry in much the same way as she is. But he also warns her against feeding into that to the point where it becomes hate. To me, anger is a temporary emotion that helps assert my own personal space when others are invading it. The only time that the old roommate ever acknowledged that they might have been doing something wrong was when they saw me angry. I've learned that is actually the healthy way to go about it, to let my anger stir me to measured action. I needed my anger to help me overcome the patterns I grew up in of complacency and feeling defeated to the point of accepting continued and undeserved punishment. Hate, on the other hand, well, I suppose hate offered its hand to me through the thoughts I had to sort through in the fallout after leaving that whole situation. In my own life, I knew that giving into hate would be destructive and unhelpful. Knowing that did not make such feelings go away, but it did empower me to choose to not let them control me. It was a process of healing. The impulses to more drastic actions were what I started with, like, okay, let's not do that destructive thing. Then over time I realized the more subtle ways it was controlling me and worked on those, talking them through with counselors and trusted loved ones. I certainly ruminated with some hateful thoughts, but I didn't hold on to them. I didn't foster them. I didn't go through with them. I got through them. I gave myself time to heal, keeping the space I needed from those I was angry at. I'm very glad I never accepted that hand. My life would have gone the wrong direction if I had, and I would have lost the opportunities I've had to have a life as good as I have it now.
So I chose to lose my doubts and lose my chains, lose each weakness that remains, now that I have nothing left to lose.
Cassandra is not wrong in saying that her fate is hers to choose. It's not currently a great choice, but it is hers to choose, just as mine has been mine to choose. And I am very glad I didn't choose to lose everything, but rather got it all back. Depending on how you look at it, I did lose the community. I haven't exactly gotten that back yet, but did I even have it in the first place? I would like to have a community to let go of the people who were the chains of my life, the beliefs that held me captive in self-deprecation and self-flagellation. And I suppose, like for me in terms of doubts, it was more fears like, oh, I'm too afraid to let go of this, to listen to my doubts. Yet it was when I listened to my doubts and when I was willing to ask questions about the things I had been taught that I found freedom. That is what I needed to do to lose the things I was afraid of losing. My social circle, because it wasn't good for me. Just as Rapunzel and Cassandra's friendship, as it wasn't good for Cassandra. I was so afraid of losing that circle because before I had that social circle, I felt like an outcast. When I found this social circle that seemed to accept me and was willing to talk about the hard stuff, when I found that group, I thought I had hit gold. Yet it was in losing that social circle, the very thing I feared most to lose, that I found freedom. I found myself, I found strength, I found more in me. I found life and opportunity and self-love, and I was able to see the love in my family stronger as well. Even as I have left the faith that they ascribe to, they still love me, which I'm glad to have because I know not everyone is so fortunate. The point is, by losing what I thought was the biggest and most important thing in my life between faith and that community, in losing those, I gained everything.
Cass, don't do this! It's not too late for us to make things right.
Hold your fire.
Rapunzel, I want to believe you, but...
No! I said we didn't need to attack her.
Project Obsidian, huh? Xantiri was right.
Cassandra!
You want me to be the bad guy? Fine. Now I'm the bad guy.
I've felt that. Being told by doctrine and fellow believers that I was evil made me terrified that I would do evil, and that fear would manifest its own object. I actually felt like it was driving me to be more sinful, as it were. I would get so anxious that I would do whatever it was I was afraid of doing. I would just snap at some point and say, I'm doing it. What you got to say now, anxiety? Reflecting back now from outside the faith, I realize that I hardly ever did anything actually wrong in those moments. But if I had stayed in the faith, I could see how that fear might have helped actually drive me down a dark path. Now I'm not so afraid of that anymore, since I no longer believe that I am hopelessly evil and irredeemable without a God that I could never feel, much less be comforted and assured by. I no longer feel that religious pressure to be afraid pulling me down that dark path, but rather I feel free to be who I want, someone good and creative who can be at peace being much more my authentic self.
Cassandra, come on! I need your help. Snap out of it, Cass! We've got to stop Santiri before it's too
late? Raps, look around. We failed. I've failed.
No. You can do
I can't do anything! Why won't you just give up on me? Can't you see what I've done? Look around you! This is all my fault! I've done terrible things! All this time I tried so hard to prove that I was more than everyone thought, but they were right.
No. Cassandra. No.
Raps, I am so sorry.
Cass, I was thinking about when we first met. Do you know it was nearly 3 weeks before I heard you laugh for the first time? I guess there wasn't much to smile about, after being put in charge of a free-spirited flower child who painted smiley faces all over your things. But that first laugh was so remarkable because I knew you meant it.
What do you mean?
When you laughed, you had this look in your eyes. I don't know, it was like seeing you, the real you, for the first time. And that's the Cassandra I became best friends with.
Why are you telling me this?
Because even when I look at you now, after all that's happened, no matter what we've done to each other, I still see that look in your eyes. You're my best friend, Cassandra, and I will never give up on you.
When Rapunzel calls on Cassandra, it is Cassandra's silence that gets Rapunzel's attention. Rapunzel finally gives Cassandra what she needs: validation, encouragement, and trust. Rapunzel acknowledges how Cassandra is feeling by speaking to it. She refutes the untruth that there is not more in Cassandra and embraces her back. Then she encourages her with what she admires most about her authenticity, her sincerity, and explains it in such a way that Cassandra knows it is dearly treasured, that she is dearly treasured. I've tried so hard to prove that I was more than everyone thought, but they were right. I think this hits the nail on the head, revealing more of what I always thought wasn't quite right about labeling Cassandra's attitude as entitled. That entitlement was actually more of a mask for this emotional need that she's had all along. The need to be heard, mirrored, and validated in her emotions that she never got in her childhood. Cassandra has desired so much to get the recognition her merit deserves that she has been inauthentic at times when trying to get it, even though she herself wished that most people would know her for her authentic self. She longs for the freedom to be her authentic self around people without having to hide from happiness just to avoid embarrassment. She is not a handmaiden, not a lady-in-waiting, but a warrior. She just wants a fair shot to prove who she is, so that others would know it, trust her, and respect her for it. I was there too with my old religious community. I was so caught up in my unresolved hurt, so desperate for relief and sanctuary from my inner anguish that I overcompensated into acting like someone else just to fit in. That is what Rapunzel values most about Cassandra. Her ability for authenticity. This runs tangent to the whole point of the series. There is more in you. There is more in me, and all of it is me, not some faker. If I try to be fake, then I don't find what more is in me. I can only find what's there, and I can only manifest it if I accept and embrace it. Bringing it out into the world, saying, "Here I am. This is me." Only that way will I feel empowered and free to live my life authentically.
It means there is more in you.
Plus est en vous.
What?
Plus est en vous means there is more in you, Cassandra.
To me, this mantra is not just saying that I am already all that I need to be, and I just need to let myself out. It is saying that I have the seed in me to grow and change, to be better and to become more than I am now. Indeed, in my own life, I value growth because I recognize how a lot of my problems and pain come from myself. But I have learned that I can grow out of most of it, if not all of those self-caused problems. Since I've learned I can do something about it, why would I want to stay in pain and possibly cause pain to others? I know for me, I think deep down, even when I was trying to be pious, the real reason I always wanted and still want to grow to be better is because I don't want to be in emotional pain, certainly not pointless pain. And what's more pointless than letting fear and feelings slap me up one side and down the other when I can do something about it? There is more in me. There is the power to heal and grow into all that I want to be.
Any idea where you're headed?
You know, someone very wise once told me that there's more in me. And it's telling me I need to go out there and find my own destiny.
It's funny. This whole time, I believed your place was here, in Corona, with me. But as much as I hate to let you go, I know you're right.
I love you, Raps.
I love you too, Cass.
Speaking of destinies, what are you waiting for?
In the end, Cassandra does go off by herself. She realizes that she doesn't need anyone else in order to be comfortable and confident in herself. She is finally ready to discover the more that is in her. Over the course of making this essay, something happened that was as if life was throwing a quiz at me just to make sure I had truly learned all of the lessons I've talked about here, to make sure they had sunk in. I was playing a game of Scrabble with my folks when another loved one called, and because my dad is hard of hearing, it was a little too easy to hear what they were saying over the phone, with it being cranked up so loud. They were only talking about logistics and plans, but I was nonetheless reminded by that of how the loved one on the other end of the phone was still somehow friends with my old discipler. Even though I had once tried to point out how maybe the discipler isn't the best person to have in your life, this loved one just said that they've known the discipler longer than me. It made me feel insane again, being reminded that they were still friends. It brought back so many feelings of helplessness, depression, and anxiety. I was just triggered by being reminded of it, and it hit hard in that particular moment, and I had to excuse myself from the game, and I just went into my room and laid down in the dark, and I was like, no, because this sort of vibe, this mentality, this darkness was coming over me that I recognized all too well. I honestly figured I'd probably just be in that depressed, scared, cowed, petrified state for the rest of the night and just have to figure it out from there. But I took a moment to ask myself, what's going on? What am I feeling? I'm scared. Why am I scared? Because this old discipler might come back into my life, and I'm feeling insane and invalidated because what I think happened to me apparently isn't actually a big deal to people. Like, maybe I'm the one who's insane. Maybe I'm the one who's at fault for all of this terrible emotional atmosphere I'm breathing in. You know, the biggest fear was just that hard to describe primal fear of that discipler possibly coming back into my life in some way because they're still connected to this loved one. That was the overwhelming thing. And then the secondary thing was I was just terrified that I would have to revert back to this dysfunctional, manipulative, animalistic creature that would have to lash out just to try and feel safe. It was terrible. Like I was going right back to where I was, living in that shadow, emotionally and mentally. The pattern was rearing its ugly head, and I felt powerless to do otherwise. But I stopped, and I asked myself, what's going on? What am I feeling? I'm scared. Why am I scared? I'm scared because of those reasons. So what do I do? And then it occurred to me. I validate myself. I remember, I know now, I have in me the strength to acknowledge and affirm that even though my loved one can't hear me when I raise the warning, that doesn't mean what happened to me wasn't wrong. It doesn't mean that those things didn't happen to me. I know what happened to me. I know it was wrong. I know that I don't want to be near, much less under, that discipler ever again. And I don't need to keep living under that shadow where all these emotions keep degrading and deteriorating me. And so, once I had realized that, I was finally both realizing and putting into practice what I had been espousing and studying for months, especially with working on this essay, that the answer to my freedom from that dark decade of my life is to validate myself. To realize that I have the strength in me to affirm what I know to be true, and that I can rise above it. True, there is no easy answer to the fact that my loved one is still friends with this discipler, but I don't need to try and change that. It's not my place to try and change that. I've said my piece to my loved one about the discipler, and beyond that, it's up to them what they do with their life. I'm not going to try and manipulate it, and I don't feel like I need to anymore. Because of the way I was raised, I had an emotional void growing up, and that instilled in me a pattern of latching on to other people, desperate to find validation, to where I ended up in a dysfunctional and degrading codependent relationship with this discipler and his folks. And then I finally broke away from that and started processing it, including writing this essay. And then life threw this little quiz at me just to make sure I had learned, and I have. I realized that the answer is to validate myself, to know that I'm not insane, to affirm that what happened to me wasn't right, that I don't need to hold on to it, and that I can rise above it and discover what more is in me. There's so much more in me. I'm not a cowarding, useless, insane person. I'm a brave, courageous, caring, and creative person who's ready to leave their mark on the world, who can validate themselves and be confident in themselves, ready to go out and discover my destiny. That's the answer to my freedom. Freedom from this enslavement to that emotional void blooming in some dark flower into codependency and manipulation. Freedom to rise above it. To acknowledge and yet build in spite of that void a mountain inside of myself of confidence, self-esteem, self-assurance, courage, and freedom to create, to live my life, to discover my destiny, to be a good person. So not 10 minutes later, with those emotions fading away, I got up and rejoined my family to finish that Scrabble game and live my life. So now, I hear my cue, and I am no longer waiting.
Somehow at last we were all truly home.
Living happily ever after.
Living happily ever after. Living happily ever after.
It takes two. No, I'm not blaming you. It's not hard admitting my part. I gave up too much power, and in the final hour, I am finally working through the scars given by you. After all this time, I see the answer to my freedom is taking my heart in my hands, heal it so it can expand. Get down and pray, step out in faith. I need to recreate. I am finally working through the scars given by you. After all this time, I see the answer to my freedom is taking care of me.